All right, everybody, shalom, and welcome to the Yishai Fleischer Show. We're going to have a lot of fun today, starting in just a few minutes with Rav Mike Feuer, and we're going to be talking about that thing that's right behind me, if you're watching live, which is the tabernacle and the Torah's first installment of how to build that tabernacle, how to make it happen. And what you don't see behind me is also the vessels, which we'll be talking about. And I promise you, that we won't. I can't even handle all the technical sides of the vessels, but we'll talk about maybe some of their spiritual meanings or ideas behind them. And let's bring in, before we're not even starting the show because we're going to start in just a bit. We're going to ask for everybody to join us and to comment and let us know how we sound, how we look, how you're receiving it. The other day I had a good output of signal, but then suddenly it started looking bad. So already Lou Weiss is with us. Lou, now a producer. You've been elevated to the level of producer. He says looking and sounding great. Thank you very much, Lou. But let me know throughout, and also relative volumes, which is something I'm obsessed with. And let us now bring in Rav Mike Feuer. Rav Mike Feuer, shalom and welcome.
Hey, shalom Yishai. It's good to see you.
It's great to see you, and Oliveira's with us, and Lou is with us, and people are streaming in on our stream. We're streaming together. We're surfing together. Is it surfing or streaming? What do you? Because you can't really
streaming right now.
Right, but can we surf on a stream? I don't think most people surf on a stream. I think those are mixed metaphors.
If you're in a kayak, you can do.
Oh, okay, good. Well, there we go. So let's go kayaking together. And I know you're partial to that kind of stuff. So you don't actually own a kayak, though, am I right?
No, not any longer. I did once upon a time.
All right. Okay, so we've it's already 2 minutes in, so let's get started. Shalom, everybody, and welcome to the Yishai Fleischer Show, broadcasting live from Judea to the world. You're a part of it wherever you are. Shalom to Rav Mike Feuer from the Pardes Institute and from the Jewish Story, jewishstory.com. Shalom, Rav Mike.
Shalom, Yishai. It's good. It's jewishstory.co.
.co and ravmike.com. See, there you go.
That's right.
Jewishstory.co and ravmike.com. Thank you very much.
I keep the Jewish Story based out of Colombia for tax reasons.
I actually wanted you to know that I used to have a website, which was a domain, which was yish.ai. Okay, yish.ai.
Where's
but of course, AI is an island, is a little tiny island somewhere. I forgot the name of the island, but you could buy that. But the problem was that it was quite expensive to keep up for the year. The .ai. If anybody wants to fund the .ai, so I can have Yish.ai again, and let me know by reaching out to me. Rav Mike, we have a lot to talk about today. We have a stellar Torah portion with a lot of kind of hidden meaning, which I want to discuss with you today. Let's just talk about two quick topics beforehand. Number one, my children were semi-mourning today, as children are apt to do when they are promised snow and they are denied that snow. And I see here, Erica from Sweden. She says Shalom's from Sweden, and she's got little snowmen in her emojis, what I call emoticons. She has those, but here in Israel, the snow was not to come. But you yourself are angry at people who actually predict the weather. You have a problem with weather prediction. Am I right?
It's like got a little bit of a taste of avodah zarah, of idolatry. It's not the meteorologists themselves that I'm upset with, although they kind of annoy me. It's people who speak about the future as if it's a fixed reality.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's going to snow, etc. Aside from the fact that the Rebbeinu Shalom has told us that the weather is one of the most intimate indicators of our interaction as a people with God, right? So that like kind of erases that whole. It's all about science. Well, Corey, I know I said Shema this morning and explicitly declared the fact that the rain is dependent upon my personal and national, adherence to the law. I said that this morning. I didn't really mean it, because when I want to know what's going to happen, I look on the Weather Channel. But it goes to the heart of this idea that humanity lives in fear of the future because it's uncertain. And we're constantly, consciously and not, bringing to bear different systems that give us the illusion of control. And so it particularly annoys me when people walk around saying it's going to, they say it might rain. I also feel that there's just, I hate to say it, but just bad mojo. Like the more you talk about these things as if they're inevitable, so the more the Rebbeinu Shalom's like, oh yeah, watch this.
Well, That's true that he has removed wisdom from the weather men, because they're weather people, the meteorologists, because they're often wrong, especially when it comes to snow. I find, at least here, maybe you're right. Maybe outside of the land of Israel, like they're better at it, because here there's like some kind of factor where God is like, I don't want you to know the future.
It's
I
not
don't
just
know.
some kind of factor. It's the second paragraph of the Shema. Like it is core. It's not like a side thing. My kids think I'm nuts, by the way. You can see the energy I have here. I'm holding myself back. But it is fundamental. It's not like some little pet peeve of mine.
That's interesting. That's just because, like me, because I a lot of times, I like, before I go to Hebron for the day, I like to know what outerwear to take. So I look sometimes and I ask the weather people if they could, like Google, if they could let me know what would be a wise, given the temperature, what would be a wise outerwear to wear. Do you think there's something wrong with that?
No, I mean, listen, there's a difference between risk management, which is what you're speaking about, which is like, okay, like all things being equal, I want to be prepared. And this sense that your kids are heartbroken over that someone told them the future.
Right.
And they were wrong.
That part definitely rings true. But on the other hand, Rav Mike, like 2 weeks ago, I looked at the weather forecast and I saw that they were contemplating that it was going to be great sunny weather, and so I made a plan to go to the beach, and that worked out very well for me, because indeed the weather was akin to what they promoted. I'm trying to use the right words here, so not to say that they predicted. And that was useful, but I think what you're talking about is a matter of certainty and trust in science, which is if they would only use words, for example, I think I read. Oh, here's a good example. Doctors are allowed to say what they think will heal, but the rabbis go crazy if the doctors say something like he's got 6 months to live. Right. You can't say he's got 6 months to live. You don't know that. You don't have the power for that. You were not given the ability to foresee that.
And there is a middle ground, by the way. You can say, in my experience, understanding the factors at play, my estimation is this. Mm-hmm. And it may sound like really kind of like, why are you being so verbose? But it's the difference between the arrogance of claiming knowledge of the future and the humility of understanding that we are enjoying tamim. Right? You need to know that really everything's in God's hands.
Right.
And that doesn't mean you can't manage risk and plan, etc., but don't fall into the trap of thinking that you know.
Right. And that verse that you just quoted, be whole, be perfect, be simple with Hashem your God, comes right at the heels of don't try to predict the future through necromancy and bones and
meteorology.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to say speaking from the armpit, and you said meteorology. Okay. Very good. The other thing I want to discuss with you is Zayin Adar. We have a kind of a mini Jewish holiday, and some people take it more seriously than others. But it is the birth date and the passing date of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe, the lawgiver, the Torah giver, this very, very special man, very, very special man who existed, where sometimes there's a hard, and I have to be very careful how I say this, there are at some moments where there's almost a fusion between the God and this person who is channeling God to us, and in a sense, his passing day is exactly to tell you that he was not a God, or like in some other religions where they take a man and make him God. It's like, no, this was a man, but he was a great man, and at the same time, in his massive greatness, was the most humble of all people, and that's coming this Friday. Really a week before another great man saves the Jewish people, and that's Mordechai and Esther. So I just want to stop for a second and talk about like Moses as this very real thing, Moshe Rabbeinu. And I guess my one last phrase about that is sometimes I try to imagine being close to Moshe Rabbeinu, just seeing the man. Maybe shaking your hands. I don't know. Can you imagine for a second shaking Moshe Rabbeinu's hand? What would that be like? There's many Hasidic stories about like many generations down holding the knife, seeing the knife of Abraham, and how like great rabbis would begin to just shudder and shake just to see the knife of Abraham. Could you imagine gazing into the eyes, if you could, holding onto the flesh and skin of shaking the hand of Moshe Rabbeinu?
Well, what it puts me in mind of is the Khan ol Panav, right? This idea that Moshe, when he really achieved his full evolution in his relationship with Kadosh Baruch Hu, it was his soul was so apparent that it shined through his face, and he had to wear a veil because people couldn't handle it, right? And so I think it's important really to note that like you said, we get his origin, we get his story, and we have his end, in order to remind us that he was human. But the experience of Moshe was something beyond that, right? And on one hand, it's an inspiration because it means that, hey, V'shagam basar, right? The Gemara says, like in Chulin, right? That Moshe was also of flesh and blood, right? On the other hand, it needs to be a call to action in what we're capable of, and never letting ourselves off the hook of saying, I'm just human. I'm only human. I also would add, just on a personal note, that my birthday is Vav Adar. So I've always felt a certain connection to Zion Adar as just a reference point. How far have you come, and where are you going?
That's very cool. And you also live in a place overlooking kind of where the last speech... That's right, where the last speech of Moses was given, where he's buried on Har Nevo. Although I will tell you that in Hebron, there's a kind of secretive tradition that comes from places like the Sefer HaMabit and other Kabbalistic writings, that actually the angels picked up Moses' body after his burial and brought him into the land of Israel to be buried in Marat HaMachpelah. And it's actual real literature. I have seen it myself. And not only is it so real, but everything that the Torah says, well, he was buried here and no man should know. So there's kind of technical... Right, they like explain away every part and explain how he was buried in Marat HaMachpelah. So it's like a detailed literature. It's not just kind of a obscure line. And so there has been a tradition of people coming and praying at the tombs of the forefathers and mothers in Hebron on Zayin Adar.
I mean, in that sense, the Ma'ara is a klei kibul, right? It's the receiving place for the great souls of Am Yisrael. So, meaning, however one understands that idea that the angels came and took, etc., Moshe Rabbeinu certainly belongs there with the Avot and the Imahot.
Right. Just let me, to be totally correct and fair, that literature says Moshe and Tzipora, because
it's got to be a couple.
Yeah, it's a couples thing. It's a couples.
Yeah, it's a totally couples thing.
Right, because Hebron is for lovers, like I always say.
As long as you're dead.
As long as what?
You're dead.
That's right. Well, or eternally alive. All right, we have a Torah portion where, if I said this now, that once again we're starting the Torah here, it would be cliche by now. But there is an element of it, and that is because we're getting a different kind of Torah now in this week's Torah portion, which is Truma, which is in the book of Exodus, Shmot, Chav Hey, 25 verse 1. And it's all about it's now a blueprint. It's blueprint Torah, which is a different kind of Torah that we've had before. We had narrative, and from narrative we had a change of gears to law, but law of how mankind should live, how Jewish people should live. And now we're switching gears totally to blueprint Torah. Blueprint Torah is something different, and the next few Torah portions are about the tabernacle, the vessels, and the vestments of it. I guess the first place where we have to, the first verse that we have to look at is right in the beginning. It says, the second verse, which is V'khu li truma, they'll take from me a voluntary gift. Rashi says, li, they'll bring it to me, lishmi. Well, you can't give me a gift. You can't give God a gift, but you can honor His name, and that's what this thing is about. You could create a place that God's name is honored, a house of God, but it's not to the act. It's somehow the gifts that you're bringing in, the sacrifices in this building. It's not really like some kind of idolatrous thing where you can please God with your gift to Him. No, it's to honor Him and His name.
Well, there's a very fine line here, and I'm always wary of historical anachronism. That we today live in a world of abstraction to a fault, right? So much so that God has become an idea. So I hear what you're saying in the sense that we identify the physical act of giving or sacrifice. We identify those things with, well, it's a little bit idolatrous, so we're going to reframe and it's in my honor and say. I'm not disagreeing with that.
Go ahead.
But I want to first of all honor the fact that the people who stood at the foot of Sinai heard the voice of God, and when they took their gold and silver, they were giving it to the God whom they had heard. Like, one, two. We've been in exile for a long time, and to me, this Torah portion is one of the most important parshiot in healing one of the great losses which exile brought about, which is the loss of any relationship to the sanctity of the physical. Sanctity of the physical. We became experts in the holiness of time down through the generations. We have a way with the calendar. The Hebrew calendar, to me, is one of the most incredible spiritual instruments that humanity has been granted. And our calendar has a power, and in both its broad strokes and its nuances. I love we're in the middle of these Arbor Parshiot, these 4 special Haftarot readings from the prophets that I think of as like they're like riffs on the swirl of the spiral of time, and like deepen the narrative power, et cetera. But we've lost touch as a people with the fact that the physical can give you contact with the holy in a way in which time, emotion, thought cannot do. Right, and that was something which the idolatrous world knew too well. Right. Something which the Torah came to redeem and not to reject. And so therefore, I agree with you. God isn't taking our silver and gold and putting it in God's pocket. But it's important that we see this as a giving too, because the physical items themselves are a means for a relationship.
Well, you're totally right that we don't really have that experience right now. And if you've ever spent time in any Eastern Orthodox church, it's quite off-putting. You walk in there and there's this plethora of just like physical idolatry, physical things and icons. The whole thing,
icons. Yeah.
It's like they go nuts on it. It's not like one icon. The whole thing is icons, and you're just like, bleh, you just feel immediately like this is you actually.
Nature.
I'm gonna say this. Really, I'm gonna say something honest, which is not politically correct. It feels very barbaric or kind of regressive. You walk into there and this type of like and I'm specifically speaking about the Eastern Orthodox Church. It felt like not with our. It felt like you went back in time in terms of mankind's development of spiritual development. But what you're saying is that actually there's if done in the holy and proper manner with God's blessing, it's actually a way to super hyper connect to spirituality.
There's a fine line between barbaric and visceral. And one of the biggest problems of the over-intellectualized, abstracted, particularly Western culture that we come from is that it's lost the visceral.
Right.
In a positive way, it's left the visceral over to the Yetzer Hara.
Right.
But the dichotomy is extreme.
Right, but when you say lost, we literally lost, and here's the first vessel, which is we've lost the Ark of the Covenant, the Aron HaBrit. It's gone. It's hidden. It's been hidden from us. Sometimes I think to myself, maybe that's part of God's process, that he actually kept on more and more. He became more and more invisible to us, and we more and more had to yearn for him in a kind of an invisible sense.
I mean, this is a seasonal question because, that's what's called in theology Hester Panim, right? The hiding of the divine face, as it says in Devarim, in Aster Panai, right? I shall surely hide my face. And when the Gemara, again, the same Gemara referenced earlier in Chulin, asks, Esther Minayin, right? Where do we find Esther, a hint to her in the Torah? It's there, in that hiding of the face. And so the hiding of the face can be a loss of the divine presence, but as you're pointing out, it can also be an invitation for humanity to come more fully into what we would call true faith, a faith that doesn't require hand-holding and objects, but one which really flows from a depth of consciousness. So I'm not offering the physical as a substitute for that, but I'm just pointing out is that humanity is meant to live a whole life. And that physicality, that sanctity of physicality is a critical piece. And this parsha is all about that. That was my only...
Right. And that's a good point. And at the end, we're living in a time of re-embodiment. We're living in a time of coming back to Yerushalayim with the eye towards a third temple. So anyway, so this week, I got very excited about the following thought that I even told you I would tell you a thought during the show. Here it is.
Right,
you know, one of the things that I didn't quite realize, or I knew it, but I didn't understand the importance of it, was that the ark has in it, first thing, it's made of gold in terms of the boxes. It's basically like a gold box inside a wood box and inside another gold box. That's the kind of vessel that holds the stuff. Inside the Ark of the Covenant was the broken tablets, the full tablets, a jar of man, a jar of manna, not a mara of John. Okay, and also there's a machloket whether an actual Sefer Torah was inside of it or was it in the Holy of Holies, kind of on a shelf. And then there was on top of that was a kind of a covering, a lid. The lid had the two cherubs on it, which was, according to most opinions, a face. They had a face of a baby boy and a baby girl, or a young child, kind of facing one another. They were the cherubs. They had the wings kind of spread over the lid, and that there's a special word there, which is sochachin, which is like the word schach, which is like the word sukkah, which is like they hover above and kind of cover like a cloud, shelter, and maybe mask a little bit. In any case, you've seen the movie. I'm sure you've seen the pictures, what it looks like. But one thing that I kind of didn't pay much attention to is that there on the side of this box are rings, and the rings have poles that slide through them, and that's clearly for carrying. However, strangely, the mitzvah is that those poles are never allowed to leave those rings. And so even in the Holy of Holies, as uncomfortable as you would think it is, there is poles that jut out from this Ark of the Covenant, from the Aron HaBrit, and they're in those rings. And the Torah actually says, Lo yasuru mimenu, in verse 15. And I started thinking to myself, like, what is the deal? Why would these sticks be there? They're for carrying. Why does the Torah tell you have to keep these sticks? And mimanavshach, the other way, which is, if you want me to never take out the sticks, so let's just fuse it in. Why not just make it part of the thing? Like, why do you have to have these rings, and the rings have sticks, but you can't take the sticks out of the rings? You put it down, take the sticks out, right? So, what do you think? You have any thoughts on this issue?
I mean, I think that this represents one of the fundamental tensions within Mikdash, meaning we know that there's the tabernacle and there's the temple. We have the Porta version, right? The wandering in the wilderness of the tabernacle, and there's ultimately a Mokom L'Asher Yivchar, Hashem, right? That the place that God will choose has a permanence to it. We also know in Jewish history that we have our residence in the land and we have our life in exile. We also know, as we were referencing before in our somewhat whimsical discussion of meteorology, we have certainty and we have doubt, right? A doubt in a positive sense, because of course certainty is powerful, but it also limits. Doubt may be frightening, but it opens possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
This dynamic is the sort of the tension between what it is to be in motion and what it is to be at rest.
Right.
If you will, you could also take it into the particle wave tension within light, meaning these are two states of being, right? And they're both critical for existence. They're critical for divine service. They're critical for our national culture. And I think the very fact, like you pointed out, So that's as you said, like, right? If the poles are permanent, then make them part of the ark.
Right.
If poles aren't permanent, then take them out when it finally comes to rest. The answer is they are both permanent and impermanent.
Right.
Right. And this, by the way, goes to the heart of everything in the ark. I'll give you another example. Is that as you say, there's the luchot, the shivri luchot, right? There's the tablets and the fragments of the tablets inside the ark. But don't forget, the tablets themselves have one version in the book of Shemot and one version in the book of Devarim.
Right.
With major differences. Perhaps the best known being that Shabbat is Shamor in the second and Zachor in the first. But there's many others. So I have a question for you. Which
version
is inside the ark?
Right.
So the answer, I think, goes to the heart of what you're saying, which is that they're both there in that sort of Schrodinger's cat sense. That, remember, once the ark, because the other command is once the cover is put on the ark, it's never to be removed.
Mm-hmm.
So meaning the question of what's inside becomes Shamor v'Zachor.
Right.
The answer is both. In the same way that Schrodinger's cat was neither alive or dead, these are Schrodinger's tablets, right? And so Am Yisrael carries forward the sense, no, both are there. And you see it, Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad, right? That they were said in one statement, something which only God can hold these multiple possibilities. But we as a people are enjoined to do the same. We are both at rest and wandering.
Right.
We are both in perfect certainty and absolute wonder.
Right. Okay. So I was reaching for a similar conclusion, which is, you have a. If you look at the world, like, what's the one thing you could say is permanent? Well, God is permanent. All right. Well, what's his permanent place in this world? It's the Temple Mount. It's the Holy of Holies. It's the foundation stone. Like, okay, we made it. We're here. We don't have to go anywhere. Once you set that thing down here, that's it forever. Like, perfection has been reached. God says, nope. I want you to know you got to keep traveling. Just like Jacob had to keep traveling. You can't believe that God's presence is at rest. It's not at rest. It's not. There's no finality. It's not done, and your life isn't done. We didn't figure it all out. There is no quote unquote end of history. It doesn't work that way. All right. It's you got to keep going. So I want you to keep those poles in there, because it may be time to go. And in fact, my spirit may leave this place, and I may kick you out even. And actually, I may even take this very ark and hide it. And so you guys got to keep traveling. You got to keep going. And by the way, that's also why I a lot of times reject this kind of need sometimes of a certain kind of messianism, which wants to say it's all over. It's all over. This like cataclysmic. I'm like, no, that's not the commandment of God, is to be in a cataclysmic mode. It's to keep going and to keep passing it from generation to generation, with the hope that there's one day total revelation. But even in the Jewish tradition of what revelation is, it's also not exactly final to like the first Messiah. Right, you got to keep going. That's the bottom line. You got to keep going. And our whole everything about us is not at rest. The electrons that make up our world, the blood that flows through us, the synapses that keep firing, like actually stopping is death. And even that is not that at the end. Yeah, right, not even death, exactly, because your soul goes on. Right, exactly. Right, and that's the worst curse of them all. Right, I will erase you. You will be a non-being. That means you're not moving anywhere. You're done. So don't reach for that, even at the most perfect state that you can imagine.
And another way to approach this is that perfection, in the static sense, is unavailable in our world, because our world is that aspect of divine perfection which is constant perfecting, meaning processes its own form of perfection, and our world is not broken because of an accident or a fall. Our world is the expression of that aspect of divine perfection, which is constant perfecting, which is why we can never be at rest, because to be at rest would be in contradiction to existence itself.
Right. So there you go. Got to keep those poles in, everybody. Got to keep going. Speaking of
movement, folks.
That's right. So speaking of movement, there's a lot of movement on our comments. We got Chava. Chava puts me straight. She says, Mordechai did not save the Jewish people. Esther did. The most you could say is that Mordechai helped or encouraged Esther to save the Jewish people. But to say Mordechai did without mentioning Esther is to erase the contributions of our great women.
Go, Chava, you're totally right.
You're right, and I think I did mention Esther actually, but in any case, And I think actually it's their amazing teamwork. It's Aaron, Moshe, it's Esther, and Mordechai, etc. It's actually,
Well, I think the important inversion there is that Mordechai plays the role of facilitator.
Right.
Esther is the actor there. And
right.
That's a very important inversion. The male-female dynamic in the Megillah is one of the most complex and powerful in all.
Right. Like one of the Nahafochus is when Esther, when Mordechai listened to everything Esther told him. That's one of the inversions where she says to him, "Okay, so do thus," and he's like, "Okay," and he accepts what because before that she always listened to his words, and so in the middle of the Megillah he starts listening to her words, and that's part of the redemption. Our friend Jay White says, "Shalom Aleichem, gentlemen. Much love to you guys, and thank you again for the great Parsha talk. Thank you for your prayers for my mother with COVID in London, Yvette Bat Irene, who is doing better. Baruch Hashem." And we continue to pray for her and all the people that need healing right now.
Amazing.
So Yvette Bat Irene, bracha v'atzlacha. My good friend Aaron Feuer from Beersheba, one of the greatest tour guides, and also Sofer Stam, what do we call that? A scribe, and a great dad as well. He's got a great picture here. You see him under a waterfall there. Aaron, let us know what your website is, and I want everybody to come. I'm sure you're also giving some kind of great digital tours as well. He's fabulous also on Instagram. That's Aaron. We have a lot of good friends here. We have our good friend Mark Pickles as well. It says, Boker Tov, already a fascinating discussion. You bet, Mark. We're not wasting our time around here, okay? We're not playing around. This is serious. All right, we got some. We're going to start it off strong. So absolutely, Mark writes great articles also at Times of Israel. Check him out, and he's got a great perspective. And Jay said, as I said to you before, he says, my mother is recovering. And Allison says, hello from Manchester, UK. We've got a big UK contingent around here. Thank God. Let's go on to the next thing. Let's go on to the next issue.
Our time is short and our work is long.
That's right. The time is short as our work is long. So let me go. I wanted to actually ask you something. I actually had something I wanted to ask you. What is the deal of God saying, I'm going to show up and I'm going to speak to you from between the two cherubs, which are on the Ark of the Covenant? Why does it say I'm going to speak to you? And the rabbis say it's exactly equidistant between the four wings. Like, why is that important? Like, talk to me. I don't know. Why do you need to let me know what the point of your voice is going to come from? What am I? Is that a meditative technique thing? Sometimes I think that's.
It definitely is a meditative technique, because as the writer in the Gemara in Brachot says that ultimately, this idea that when you're outside of the land of Israel, you face Israel to pray. When you're in Israel, you face Jerusalem. When you're in Jerusalem, you face the Temple Mount. From the Temple Mount, you face the Holy of Holies. If you're inside the Holy of Holies, it says you should face the space between the Kruvim.
Right.
So this is a point of consciousness.
Right.
And what it puts me in mind of is Rashi earlier in Shemot, when God is giving the commandments around the new moon and the Pasach offering, says that Aaron and Moshe spoke to the people. And Rashi says, what do you mean Aaron and Moshe? Moshe spoke to the people. He says, well, no, really, they honored each other, and they basically said, you go ahead, you go ahead, you go ahead. And each one, in honoring the other, it says a dibur yatza mi b'nei shneim, right? That the speech actually came out from between them. And I think that this is an important message in terms of what it is we're receiving. We're not actually getting what God says. We're getting what God says that we can hear. That there's a point of contact that, which on one hand is an incredible thing, that humanity is able to receive the divine. On the other hand, be careful and understanding that it's yotzei b'nei kruvim, like it's not straight from God, so to speak.
Right.
That there's this point of relationship, which is always relevant in communication. I can tell you as a counselor, right? The fact that you say something does not mean that you know what another person heard.
Right.
Most
sure.
people actually have no idea what they're saying. Right. But even if you know what you're saying,
right,
does not necessarily mean you know what another person heard. You have to appreciate that communication happens in the space between.
And you say that as a counselor. That's true certainly in marriage, counseling, relationships. It's also true in the law.
Oh, yeah.
To understand exactly what transpired, there's a lot of scientific evidence about how people perceive things and how skewed perception is, and our rabbis are very cautious about to investigate and to how do we l'chkor edim? How do we say that? To
question the witnesses.
Questions of witnesses. All right, let's go on. Time is limited. The next thing that we learn about is the show table, the table of bread, the show bread.
Showtime.
Show bread, yeah. Shogun of Harlem. That was from when I was a kid. If anybody remember. Oh yeah. Before I go on, I just want to say homework for everybody listening to the show today, either live or later or on podcast. I just want to say, tell me about how you send me an email about your vision of the cherubs. Do you have any kind of drawing of that, like we did with the ladder of Jacob? Do you have a vision of the Ark of the Ark of the Covenant, the Aron Brit, the Luchot Brit? Do you have a vision of that? Do you use it as a meditative technique? Like in your house, is there a picture somewhere of the Ark or any of the vestments really? Like what are the vestments? Like right here, I'm looking in my room. I was like wondering what vestments did I have, and just a quick look, I see the menorah is really part of the of my meditative technique, because I think a lot of these things could also be turned into tools of meditation, trying to
No question.
see through this godly. The showbread is probably not one that most people meditate on, but it's one of the three vessels that has a crown. It has a little crown, and this crown stands for kingship, right? Keter Malchut. This is the prosperity that flows through the kingdom and the kingship and the king. And so we have the showbread. Do you want to say something about the showbread and the weird U-shaped breads that were switched out every week inside the tabernacles? And why is it called lechem apanim anyway? Does bread have face?
Because it's Rashi says because it's shaped like a U, like this.
Right.
That it's got panim le'el panim. That it's got face to face with itself.
So it's got a little cherub action going on there, actually.
To a certain degree, yeah. I mean, all I would say is about that the table represents sustenance and parnassah, right? As opposed to as it faces the menorah and with its light, it's sort of wisdom. And I think it's very important to appreciate that this flows from the divine. It flows from the divine. It's a key element of our relationship. And again, in fighting against the abstraction and the spiritualization of our relationship to God, that you can experience God in the bread that you eat, in the money that you earn, in the hard work that you do, as much as you can in the prayers that you pray, in the Torah that you learn, and the thoughts that you contemplate. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Now, what could be more iconic for the Jewish people than the menorah? The menorah, seven candelabra. Seven-branched candelabra. That's right. And I love this. Once you get used to the next thought in Judaism, all you folks out there that don't come from the Jewish tradition, I just want you to know the way we do it is that we'll say to you, the menorah looked like this, but it could have also looked like this. Okay, we have
perhaps
right. That's right. And I have here. Where's that little? There's here they are. Here, I don't know if you could see this right now. I'll put it up in front of the screen, but. It's the rounded kind, it's the straight out kind, and it's also the straight with a curvature kind. There's different versions of it, and there's different kind of spiritual meanings to it, and there's different traditions of it. Now, archaeologically speaking, almost all of the archaeological evidence that we found of people drawing it in different places was rounded. I just want to say that out there, okay? Almost exclusively, we have found rounded versions from different centuries and different times. So that's one. On the other hand, we have the famous drawing of the Rambam, which has them straight, and Chabad has taken it upon themselves to kind of promulgate that perspective. And then there's even a third one where it's kind of half and half, where it's straight, but it has a curvature at the end going up. But anyway, what's that?
Nice.
But I want to say that the menorah, which is so iconic, is also, we're just used to it, but really it's kind of weird. It's really kind of weird. And it's so weird that Moshe Rabbeinu had a hard time, according to Rashi, according to the Gemara, he had a hard time getting it. He didn't understand what was going on. So there's one version that God showed him a fiery menorah. And there's another version that God's like, just throw the gold into the fire, it's going to come out.
Perfect.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
The written description, the kaftor, the ferach, the kanim, it gets quite complicated. I mean, as someone who learns the parsha with Shnai Mikra Echad Targum with Rashi every week, this parsha is a challenge because Rashi is like basically attempting to describe to you how you would tie your shoelaces in prose. I mean, he's like trying to explain each detail in a way in which those of us who can't instantly picture the the description of the Torah can grasp, and it's quite verbose. This is not a simple task.
Okay, so I just want to say that we're low on time. So I say the other major thing that's discussed in this Torah portion is, as we said, the vessels of. We did the Ark of the Covenant, the showbread table, the menorah, and then we have the big mizbeach, which is the animal sacrifice mizbeach, the altar.
You did it.
That's right. And then the other thing is the actual kind of yard, or should we say the structure of the courtyard, the tabernacle, and how it's and also the tent of it, which is the 3 or 4 different coverings that you may have, including a potential unicorn-like covering.
Swimming unicorns.
There's a dolphin version of it as well. There's many versions.
Multicolored swimming unicorns.
That's right. Now I heard that I was listening to the great Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Weinberg, a real old school rabbi, teaching it, and I just love to hear his voice. Although I listened to it, I learned from our friend Zev. I listened to it at 2 times speed. But he's great. But he's so great. But he said something that I wanted to kind of tell him that he made a little mistake. He said, "Where would they get dolphins?" Truth is, the Red Sea has dolphins. Yeah, I have seen them myself. They are not multicolored dolphins, nor is this a narwhal exactly.
I was going to say, there are unicorns in the sea.
Yeah, it might have been a type of narwhal, but we don't know what it is. And Rashi says this was an animal just for its time, a very special and a very beautiful thing. And there's a lot of talk.
First indication that the Jews caused the extinction of a species.
Oh no!
Oh, blame us.
And by the way, I just want to say that this week's Torah portion is the first mention of Tchelet, and the good folks, one of the sponsors of our show, the Tchelet folks, Tekhelet, the Tchelet.com folks, have actually a raffle right now that you can win your own beautiful, like top of the line talit for Yamim Noraim, for the high holidays. So go to Tchelet.com, check it out. If you put in wine, Lou Weiss corrects me. Oh my gosh, I made a mistake. He says Tzvi Hirsch Weinreb, not Weinberg. Correct. Thank you very much. And Aaron, who's a Chabadnik, it's got to be told, he says it is possible that the second temple period it was round, and the first temple period it was straight. And he says after all, there were many incorrect things in the second temple.
Ooh, the Chabadnik.
That's right. He smashed.
That was smooth at the end.
Yeah.
I love it.
And what you're seeing right now, if you don't get what we're talking about, this is the heart of Judaism. Oh, yeah. The heart of Judaism is these little discussions, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe was very adamant on that it was a straight, not rounded menorah, and very, very interesting discussion. And the beauty is that kind of both are true. That's the beauty, and both can symbolize different aspects, different mystical aspects, different issues. By the way, I want to say that Aaron says my Instagram is Tour Guide Aaron at Instagram. It's one of the best Instagram accounts. He's always been on top of that and shows really beauty of Eretz Yisrael. So check that out. And Ariella says, she says Shalom from La Fierra, Texas.
Oh, keeping warm down there, I hope.
No, I think that's actually having a major snowstorm in Texas.
That's what I said. Keeping warm down there.
Right. Okay, yeah. I don't know why that's in the news, but it is. But I want to finish off. Rav Mike Feuer. By the way, people can find you at jewishstory.co and ravmike.com for both more of your other show, which is the Jewish Story, which is a Jewish history podcast and one of the best there is out there. In fact, I'm a little bit behind right now just because I'm trying to catch up on a lot of different contents, including Daf Yomi, which had amazing things yesterday. If anybody has a chance to catch a Daf Yomi, look up page Paz, Pei Zayin, 87, incredible Agadot, including the mention.
Psachim right now?
We're in Psachim, that's right. We're in Psachim.
Yeah. All the way through, there's more than just that Daf. It keeps going.
Oh, yeah. But just yesterday's Daf was a mind blower, and I have to go back over it. but people can check out your Jewish history podcast, which is called Jewish Story, jewishstory.co, and also avail themselves of your spiritual counseling, fabulous assistance that you give to so many people, and that's found at ravmike.com. So big yasher koach, and thank you so much for joining me today on the Yishai Fleisher Show. I just want to finish off by actually talking about what I should have talked about in the beginning, but I didn't consult my notes here, and that is the quintessential verse of this whole thing, and one of the famous verses of the Bible, of the Torah, which is Vasuli Mikdash V'shachanti Betocham. Everybody turn your Bibles, your Torahs, to Exodus, Shmot, Chaf Hei, Chet, 25:8. And that verse there says, Vasuli Mikdash, they'll make for me a sanctuary, a holy place, V'shachanti Betocham, and I will dwell within them. Just last night at dinner with the kids, I said to them, give me a few different explanations for this verse. And my kids did so. And they range from build me a temple and I will be within the Jewish people, but make it a holy place, because that is how I can exist amongst you. You have to make me a mikdash, not a bayit, but a mikdash. It needs to be holy so that I could dwell amongst you. All the way to Vasuli Mikdash, keep your body holy. Put on those tefillin for men, keep your body holy, keep it healthy. V'shachanti betocham, and I will dwell within you. Make your body into a temple, not in a Greek type of way, which is all about, so that's not making it a temple, but making it a self-serving, idolatrous place. Rather, make it a temple for me to reside within you, in your thoughts and in your body, and I will be within you. So that is the quintessential sentence and a statement of this Torah portion. I wanted to ask you about it.
Well, I would say really that's where we began, though you didn't mention it. It's because this idea that the physical world is not other than God, and that through harnessing wood and stone and gold, I mean, that's a language of the Bible. Don't worship gods of wood and stone. No, but worship God with wood and stone. Meaning you can make a Suli Mikdash, your capacity as tool makers, as builders of the world, as creative individuals, has a potential to build sacred vessels. And when we put our abilities to that task of building sacred vessels in the physical world, then God will meet us there. That's what I would say.
And what about the self? What about the duality of this verse that also is like, the duality is what we were talking about before, which is there's Mishkan and Mikdash. Sometimes you're on the road, you got to be your own personal temple in this world. I mean, I have a take on this about women and men. This if to stereotype the roles that men are out there, have to go out to the world, and the wife represents the home, then I say that's why we actually have different scrolls that keep us holy. The men, it's a scroll on my arm against my heart, and on my head against my mind. And so that is a portable scroll, and that's for me to go on my way in my life. By the way, the tefillin, phylacteries is a bad word. The tefillin on my head actually look like the temple. There's a similarity there. But for women, and I'm saying this in a stereotypical fashion, so don't try to get me on it. I'm not saying that women are limited to the house. I'm not saying that at all. But in classic gender roles, the mezuzah represents the scroll for the woman, which is to bring godliness into the home and into the family, and therefore she doesn't have to put it on her arm and on her head, which the man has to kind of go and go out, but rather to bring it into the household. So I always say this is the woman's scroll, or the woman's like tefillin, and the tefillin for the woman is the mezuzah. It's just a way of thinking about these things. But there's also what I wanted to ask you also about the ability to make yourself a holy vessel. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you make yourself a holy vessel? V'shachanti betocham, I will dwell within you, also within you individually.
I would say that taking seriously the importance, not just of like the health aspect of one's physical self, but the fact that this is how we act in the world.
Right.
One of the great sort of powers of physical existence is this is where change happens. This is where action is real. It's where the tire hits the road. And even though it also comes with all the limitations and the breakdowns and the complications, in the end of the day, the life of the mind will not affect the world until it finds action in the body. So I would say that that's really our mission. That's why the Torah is so focused on action. That's why the mitzvot are to be done in the world.
And I just want to then take that sentence that statement that you just made and just turn it into actionable, which is, let's make one thing holy this week. If we can work on it, it's our mouth. It's what we say. It's how we say it. It's the love that we share through it. It's the lashon hara, the slanderous talk that we don't share through it. It's how we eat. It's what we eat. It's really the thing that is one of the greatest powers of holiness in this world is speech, and the mouth is a great gift. It's usually a great gift when it stays shut, but if it's going to speak, let it be speaking words of holiness.
Amen.
Aaron Schaefer, our friend, says, Yishai, tell the truth, you're a Chabadnik too. Just because I pray in a Chabad shul, enjoy the Hayom Yom, say the Tehillim of the day, and have some pictures around my house of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and believe in his precept of being in Shlichut. Yeah, I guess that does make me a partial Chabadnik, but I think in many ways this whole generation has been influenced very much by Chabad. But I still hold on to some Litvak inside, the Pintala Litvak, inside. You can't let that go.
Well, I'm going to release my inner Yeki and tell you I have to go.
That's right, and therefore I'm going to release Zev's phrase to you, which is Chazak u'mevorach, be strong and be blessed. Rav Mike Feuer, thank you so much for joining us, and God bless you, and Shabbat Shalom, and have a great Zayin Adar, and I can't wait to talk with you next week about Megillat Esther, the great heroine.
Shabbat Shalom, bye-bye.
All right, folks, that was Rav Mike. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll be back here later on. I'll be back live again today with Malka Fleischer, and we can't wait to reconnect with you. So God bless you. Stay strong. Stay connected. Stay full of love. Stay holy. Stay awesome. Stay part of the story. More great stuff is on the way. And shalom.